Hello and welcome to Universum's presentation of Talent in Emerging Markets. Claudia Tattanelli, also known as Chloe, has presented this webinar on November 5th. Chloe is the Global Director at Universum, and she's responsible for the expansion in the Middle East and Africa. She's been working with talent and strategy for the last 2 decades and has previously been our CEO of Americas and Asia Pacific.
Today it's really a great pleasure for me to present this data as I travel extensively to these regions as well, and I've met a lot of organizations and universities, and I'm really passionate. So with further ado, I thought to go to the next slide, and I thought it would be helpful, I suppose, if you're on this webinar, it's because you know Universum, but for the sake of what I will be presenting here today, just give you a little bit of a brief understanding of how we work with the information. It represents, again, what we'll be discussing today. So, as you probably know, we conduct extensive research, many of which you will see here today, and I hope it's not too much. We collect both for graduates and professionals all across the globe. We do that to understand the whys and behind their behaviors, and understanding the millennial generation better. And based on the findings, we then also, of course, draw a lot of the analysis, giving you some insights and the whys of why things are, as well as to help you understand how to best activate, how to best communicate the different messages. So throughout the deck today, you will see a little bit of everything, some information, some research, also a lot of analysis from us, as well as some best practices out there in order for you to really understand what our company is doing to address this particular issue. So if you continue to the next slides, you'll understand. I think you know the scope. We are present in over now 52 countries. We're extremely proud of that. Added several, around 12 this particular year, and you see them all at the top. But for today, we will concentrate specifically on the Middle East and Africa. So you see them at the bottom of this presentation: South Africa, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, Morocco, Algeria, Egypt, Turkey, Kuwait, Lebanon, UAE, and Qatar. And often when I refer to EMEA, it'll be in the upper part of this slide, so all that goes under Europe. And you'll see a lot of comparisons. I'm only going to draw them whenever they do and are relevant, as the goal here today is to explain to you and define what are global themes that are definitely present and important across the globe, no matter what the geography or the target, and also instead what is important for you to localize, what are things that are different and resonate much more in a certain part of the country or with a certain target group than not. And speaking of the target group, we are really generalizing when we say Middle East or Africa. In fact, all of these regions represent some very, very complex market themselves, and within them there are a lot of different realities and different underrepresented minorities that are really a difficult target to recruit for. So I will refer a lot to the nationals in the different Middle Eastern countries, and then that is because there are specific efforts that must be done and are really at the top of a lot of organizations' challenges, and I will address them. So at the end of this deck, I really do hope there are questions. If they're not all answered here now, I will definitely try to later on and offline. So I thought to begin with, it's important to frame the topic as well, and why are we talking and why is it so important, all this webinar series? Well, if you look at the annual rate of the population change, you'll understand that, of course, these are the regions where there is the strongest increase, and because of that, we go to the next part as well, there's also projected growth rates. This reminds me, I've been doing this for 19 years, that I usually looked at when I was presenting on the BRIC regions, similar stats, and of course for Asia, there were really, really tremendous growth. Now we've seen these same growth and the rapidity of it very, very strong in the Middle East and Northern Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So let's get into a little bit some facts about the Arab world. And again, very big generalizations, facts that I believe will help you more in your recruiting and employer branding challenges, rather than just hoping to be completely extensive. And these may help you in some meetings that you have internally to sort of frame the topic. As you see, with a collected GDP growth, 2.85 trillion, this is one of the top 10 largest economies, and it is larger than India, Russia, or Brazil, something, again, surprising usually when we see them, but it's not so much how large they are, it's that they're rapidly growing. And of course, this is also because more than half of these million at the age of 25. And the middle class is young, educated, and globally connected. And this last point, globally connected, you will hear me mention it a lot. I've done this many, many years. And the issue, the opportunity here is that there are new tools that this generation is using that are really easily and accessible. And it is an opportunity for all of you to be able to communicate more broadly and more effectively as well with them. And at the bottom here, I added, over the past few years, the level of connectivity has been increasing drastically. So very, very quickly. As you see here, the internet penetration jumped 294%, and also mobile data traffic grew. An interesting stat here to the right is in Saudi Arabia ranks at #1 globally in YouTube use per capita and in Twitter use across EMEA, as you see, closely followed by Turkey at 39% and UAE 34%. So this is really, really important when you're asking yourself, what channels should I use, or should I use channels, not just for employer branding purposes, but this is really all about consumer branding as well. So hopefully you can tag along in the communications group as well and share this. When it comes to instead looking more into the African world, and again here, sorry for the generalization as it is, here this is actually the fastest growing continent with a labor force larger than that of China or India by 2035. This growth has been driven, of course, by improved economic governance, and also on the continent in the private sector, but also lots and lots of foreign direct investments. You see this especially when in your job in itself, the big brands, the consumer brands, there's a lot of also foreign big names, and you'll see them also coming up in our rankings, very, very strong. And the internal demand is beginning to become a source of Africa's growth. So now there are many new industries coming up and popping up, and many, many new opportunities because the middle class is as well. So a similar situation, not quite the same as the Arab world, but definitely similar when it comes to the internet use that keeps increasing. Well, this is in particular a country that has really early adapted to the mobile world, also because it had to. There was no infrastructure, and there's been a lot of investment in submarine data transmission cables that have allowed connectivity everywhere. And there are great videos, even from Vodafone, if you go online, that really tell you and share with you even more some fun stats that that I am not sharing here with you today on comparisons. But in Kenya, nearly 99% of the internet subscriptions are on mobile phones. So having mobile-friendly websites and applicant referral programs and all will be a must. But the great news is that they're all on it, and this way allows you, they're really using it, and there hasn't been much else. When it comes to the recruiting arena, the issue in Africa is more also about, we see a lot of organizations partnering with universities to build the talent. There's a lack of that, and sending professors, really building that relationship early on, and the skill set that is needed. And another interesting fact as well is that it is the leading in the world of mobile money. They're using their mobile phones to make payments, because so sort of bypassing the banks' systems as a tool. So lots of interesting stats when it comes to this, and of course the great thing about emerging markets is that they're constantly changing, and we'll be there monitoring for you. So I know this was a brief snapshot, but this is not what we're here for. I suppose we're here to understand millennials and how does all of this impact the trends and how are they different. So before we get into them, I just wanted to share with you what are key items on companies' agenda, both globally but specifically in this region. So the first one is future-proofing the company's success with top talent. The game changers. Why are they so important? Well, in rapid economies like this and transitions, this is going to be even more important that in these regions where everything is happening, you do secure top talent. I'll show you in a second an interesting slide about that. So this is not so much necessarily about the quantities of recruits, but it is about getting the top. So where do you find them? How do you attract them? What do you say? The next one is leveraging the strength of the global brand locally. For many multinational firms, as we know, the challenge is always that you're not so local. So it is going to be important for you to leverage the fact that you're global. Multinational firms with domestic origins will always be the preferred choice, but can you explain why instead you should be, and how globally connected you are, and how you can offer international opportunities, and how to say that in one message that feels very local to them and very personal, and yet really captures your global essence. So we'll look at some great examples there. Also, global workforce planning. Of course, you are trying to build your talent pipeline in these regions, and that is going to be necessary. And as I said, build relationships with schools, career services, professors. Of course, have your strong local presence, but at the same time, there are ways to capture the high and top talent, the game changers as well, using talent pools and nurturing those talent pools. So how do you engage with these students studying abroad that we see are also really the top talent? And then effectively using social media. You will see they're actually very connected, the talent pools and social media, and I don't think I need to explain any further how that will be important in these two particular emerging markets, regions. And then finally, the last two, which are understanding and capturing the attention of millennials. What is going to be key? What are some key things? Will be differentiation, how telling them why you versus others, as well as authenticity, an authentic message, no more very fancy marketing campaigns. They really do not like that. We'll show you a lot of quotes that tell you what it is that they're really looking from you. And final but not least, when it comes to work-life balance, you've all heard is the #1 career goal. You will see a lot of what they're really important to them is respect for them, having that is something that they will find when they join you, and I'll show you some interesting data on that. So diversity and inclusion, you addressing it, communicating it, will be absolutely the way that you will be able to get their attention, but definitely even more so engage. The goal is not only here to attract, but millennials are the ones working in right now that you also need to retain. So all of my presentation will really address both parts. So why is it important to get to the game changers? Why is much attention in the C-suite boardrooms on this topic? Well, the world is changing at a rapid pace. We just saw an interesting few stats here, and you need to keep up. And in order to have this top talent that can think ahead will be vital. And why do I say that? If you go to the next slide, you will see that there's been a market transition underway. If we just look at technology in Africa, we saw how they're becoming now the new banks. And of course, if banks had thought that and could foresee that just 10 years ago, they probably would have built a different infrastructure. So every industry is changing dramatically, and being ahead of the game will be vital. We see these industries to the left being the more stressed, but it's just going to be a matter of months, really, for the remainder to really feel that pressure to think differently, think innovatively, come up with those creative ideas. If not, next slide, you will see that may happen what happened to Kodak and the newcomers. One interesting finding that I heard is that in the last for the last 60 years, the average age of an organization was around 60 years. So having a strong reputation, a firm that had been around a long time, was also really something that was attractive to millennials. But in the last 8 years alone, the average age of organizations is 6 years. And that is because a lot of firms like Kodak probably couldn't see, think about Nortel, think about BlackBerry, what's ahead. So it will be absolutely key for you to have those thinkers that can think differently and bring your business to the next level. So these are 2 slides I hope will help you when you're trying to explain that. We talked about talent pools and locating your talent. And I mentioned about high achievers and game changers. Well, the best, quickest way, of course, is to look at those top schools abroad. We know this because around 35 to 40% of this top challenge actually invests, and their family, in their education abroad. And this is definitely so for countries like Turkey, in the Middle East, as well as in Africa. You can really find their top performers abroad, and colleges are extremely happy to help you identifying them, because of course they're also the ones that are paying full tuition and getting no scholarship. So it's a really key. Now I know you all know this. The issue is there are no real long-term strategies to really connect and communicate to this particular talent continuously, building that pipeline. So we really advise you to do that. I know we're helping a lot of firms identifying where and what, but there are plenty of them, and they're really also have a real global mindset. They're really also open, much more so than local talent, to working for multinational firms. And everything about them really will be and have skills that will really bring your business to the next level. I have so many slides, so I'll very much go quickly through them, but I hope you have more questions later. Another interesting fact to how to identify and even start building this talent pipeline is actually in this particular slide 14 I'm showing you. This data shocked me. I couldn't, it took me a while to just look at it and go, really? Is this possible? But if we're looking at where are the world's largest populations, of course, number one is China, then India, but then it's Facebook. Then it's Tencent, first Chinese. What's up? United States, Google+, Indonesia, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So 6 out of the 10 are social platforms. So when looking and saying, where do I start from? I think this is where you start from. And if you remember that stat I showed you about Twitter and the penetration in Africa, Turkey, and UAE, you'll now remember how they're really, really early adapters, and they're really comfortable with it. So I'd say skip a lot of the rest and go right into investing in this. So hopefully this slide can help for you to drive the case. I know you know it yourselves. If we pass along, these are also some interesting stats we just collected this year. We will be monitoring this every 6 months, and I also have it per each country. But in order to make this a little more quick, this presentation, I did aggregate. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at students and how many of them are actually actively looking for employers on LinkedIn. This is one of the highest statistics, 91% in the Middle East. And as you see, I highlighted in blue the regions that we forced into this big, broad definition. So apologies, but in order to give you that, we have it for each region as well. But nonetheless, there are some like Saudi that's even higher, but 91% on average, 83% instead when we look at Africa. And versus 87% in Europe. So as you see, specifically in the Middle East, you will really find a captive audience. They are there. They're looking. Statistics that we have never found in our 19 years of doing this that high with any other vehicle. When we're looking at following employers on LinkedIn, 87%, once they do look for you, then follow. This is about the conversation, having and opening a conversation. And of course, we go to campus and hope to discuss with them, but this is a way for you to continue that. You meet them and you drive them to these sites, and then you can continue talking to them because that's where they are, and they like that you are there as well, because when we're looking to the right side and we're asking them, are they happy that the students, if they're approached on LinkedIn, 83% say yes, 73% in Africa say yes as well, versus 63%. So they're much more open in these regions to opening that conversation and to have you there as well. So similarly, we were showing you this stat also for Twitter. Twitter is an interesting one, extremely high and growing rapidly like LinkedIn has been in the last 2 years. As you see, 57% are looking for you there. And I know this is one of those topics that when I discuss with our employers, they're not all employers are on. But what here is great as well is that you get them to follow you. And it'd probably be the same student that's following you on LinkedIn, and then later on we'll see Facebook and YouTube. So what's important is that you actually have different messages and that you really do know and master how to communicate what and when, and the consistency. We'll see a lot of what are some best and worst practices as well here. And when it comes to employers, of course, this is lower. They're not seen a lot. So I always look at these as an opportunity to tell the audience that's listening to me here today, really, if you haven't, consider strongly joining the conversation on Twitter with them. Next is showing you Facebook, and as you see here, also very, very high. So all these social networkers and professionals are very high everywhere, in Europe, in the US, and so on, but extremely high in these regions. And we added here this last point to the bottom right, how do students feel about it? And as you see, in the outside one is Africa and the middle is Middle East, and the inside, the little ring, is Europe. As you see, for Africa and the Middle East, many of them really like it very, very much. So we advise you, and I didn't show you here, but if you want to know what kind of information they're seeking on Facebook or LinkedIn or YouTube and so on, we have that data, but for reasons of timing, we couldn't put it in. And what's important too is, since these are top searches, is for the nationals, so I'm talking Emiratis or Saudi nationals, these stats are even stronger. So there is no differences between the underrepresented minorities or women or men or engineers or business, all alike. This is they're absolutely great tools. So I think I've said enough, and we'll get into later some other great communication best practices, but let's get into the millennial trends and what to find. I think you all know who they are. I think you all know that they're already in the workplace. So by 2025, they'll be 70% of the workforce. So it's not about attracting them anymore, which has been what I've been discussing for the last 18 years. It's really all about retaining talent. It's us in a lot of the cases. Not me, but many of you, I'm sure. Interesting stats about them: would rather have no job than a job they hate. You'll see some findings now. They think they deserve much more recognition than they get, which is why mentoring, leadership training, professional, holding their hands, constantly giving reassurance is a vital aspect of your relationship with them and every other manager within. 75% are not completely satisfied with their job, so you will hear them complain a lot, but that in itself is part of sort of the way they're operating in their minds, and they need the mentor to help them and guide them through. 33% choose recognition over higher pay, except for a few regions like a Germany or a Russia where that is still absolutely a key. But in general, it'll be those firms who can do both that will win their hearts. And an interesting new stat is 90% sleep with their phone next to them, and not like I do because I use it as an alarm clock. They do, and they're constantly connected, and that's also why this group we're discussing here today, more than ever, this is why you can be and converse with them at all times of the day. If we go to the next part, how has this changed the evolution of the employee? I love this chart that I found. Well, the past for Gen Xers, baby boomers, has really been about working 9 to 5, and this is the future and the present, actually, which is working anytime, really, working in a corporate offices, working versus working anywhere, using company equipment and also any device, so the openness of them using their own mobile phone or anything, as well as personalization of this part will be key for you to be open. Focus on the inputs, getting orders, but this is really all about, let me just try to do it my way, and hopefully it works. And climb the corporate ladder was absolutely important, the prestige and so on. This is instead an organization, a generation that really wants to create their own ladder and actually do it much quicker than any of us ever imagined. You will see in a second. So another very important thing, if it's the only thing I tell you here today, and this is really, really even more so true for African and the Middle East, is this is a generation that wants to know why you do what you do. Doesn't really care what type of business you're in or what are the different products you have as much as the past, my generation, Gen Xers. But it's really about why. What's the purpose? And you'll see in just a second a few firms that do it really, really well. And they're on a quest for meaning. Gen Y is all about self-actualization. They're eager to change the world and want to join a company that shares their same vision. Gen Xers were much more about social needs, so you'll see firms that were really big names that were always at the top of our rankings that no longer are. They're really open to any new firm that comes up and pops up that is doing something that really helps them feeling at home at work, reaching their own goal, their personal goal. So in other words, as we see, when we ask them top of mind, and this is for your regions, what are their long-term priorities? This is top of mind from over 1 million students, and in particular here we're honing into around 100,000 in this region. They really want to help people. They enjoy what I do. To be happy. Happiness is actually really a big word that's coming up. For them, why not talk about happiness in the workplace? We'll see a couple of great best practices from Zappos, Spotify's, and many others at Coca-Cola opening the Happiness Institute, really openly saying, why not? Why not be happy? If we go to the next slide, so we have this for every region as well, but this really is, how are companies addressing it? I always get the question, no matter what the room, Why is Google #1? I don't see them on campus. They don't seem to be recruiting. Well, you may not see them on campus because, in fact, they don't necessarily go to campus as much. When they do, they're completely swamped. But what they do really well is they target their audience, they know where to find them, and then they speak and reach their hearts. This is what they say. It's your turn to change the world. This is another one below, What Inspires You, a great one that just was launched by L'Oreal. And in it, it's a campaign where they're constantly showcasing individuals that really show how they inspire you. Here's HP. The world is waiting. Siemens, who we are is not what we do is an outcome of who we are. And then Wanted, and I love this one from BMW, the ultimate enthusiast. And final but not least, you must have seen the rebrand of EY, Building a Better Working World, which is, we test all these campaigns with the millennials and professionals all over the world. These were some of the most loved campaigns, really captured their hearts. So I advise you to make sure you have some message like this, some claim that really, really drives them to inspiration. Another really, really quick win is we see the same firms always that do everything well. Do make sure there's nothing that's left to detail. And Google never loses a minute, not even in their signature, to really restate their claim. Do cool things that matter. Unilever, dream big, set goals, take action. Then we'll see Procter & Gamble. The only thing is not so obvious that it is Procter & Gamble, but also having a claim in touch, connecting people to purpose. And here's L'Oreal, new rebrand, where it connects everyone here, really, really effective. Facebook, Twitter, and so on. And of course, they're also branding their Brandstorm competition. So what's on millennials' mind in 2014? Why do I say 2014? Because what we've noticed then by monitoring them for the last 20 years is that unlike other generations, they're constantly changing. It's not just that they're different in different regions, but every 2 years, given probably the amount of data that they consume and also advertising and constantly they're looking and so on, they're actually changing. They're changing what's important to them. They're changing what they want to hear. In 2014 and forward, what has been important to them is they want to feel secure and stable in their jobs. Or you saw they'd rather have no job at all. They want to work for a company that is inclusive, has friendly working environment, and that has a great respect for its people. This is going to be key. I'll show you in a second how then companies are communicating that. Working for a company that enables innovation by having a creative and dynamic working environment. But it is pretty clear that if 2 years ago the buzzword was innovation and we advised you to use it everywhere, just that, what we instead advise you now is to really instead talk about your creative and dynamic working environments, how you're fostering those. And why is that? Because they're very clear that innovation only comes from that, from having from having a group that is allowed to be creative amongst them. So that's why also the respect and the inclusive environment is key. They go hand in hand and drives innovation. And they want to work for challenging working environments, or else they are absolutely fine starting up their own business. In fact, this is probably, if they ask me, what is the new company out there that is everyone's competitor? Of course, Google, but they've been there for a while now. But it is actually their startups. And especially in the regions we're discussing here today. Look, even if we could still consider Russia to be an emerging market in the EMEA, you'll see Russia, UK, Turkey, UAE being some of the top populations that want to, straight after graduation, starting up their own business. And specifically for Turkey as well. What does this mean? It means that if you can, you really need to optimize your EVP, your employee value proposition, and the messaging to really include the culture and the purpose, and also provide, if you can, to the experience, an entrepreneur, or create a sense of empowerment. Explain to them how they should join you now, because you will build their skills to become and to start up their own business. Why do I say that? Because they're thinking of doing that. And if you want that top talent, those high achievers or so-called game changers, this percentage in UK, but in Turkey and UAE, grows by 40%. So those game changers, they more than ever want that. And I'm sure you can address it internally. Let me show you how. These are just a few firms that have done it effectively and are explaining, like the Brandstorm Challenge of L'Oreal, ready to innovate, come here. Even just been case competitions that build their skills to be able to know how to build the brand and get together in teams. CCI, which is Coca-Cola, supports startup weekends in Iraq and then brands it again. And this is an interesting Hire Me, a challenge that they made, a competition in a country where they sent back just interesting entrepreneurial ideas to be recruited. And then the Startup Europe, just by branding a training program like Audi did, and sub-brands, Ducati, Lamborghini, and so on, as Startup Europe, they really got a lot of people going on that site, really being interested, just because this is a hot topic that will speak to their hearts. If we proceed, because we don't have much time, what's the goal? And at the same time, the challenge for this new generation really is that of leveraging, you remember, your global EVP. So what's local, what's not? Your EVP is global. That is definitely something that stands in all countries and shouldn't be different. Of course, you are who you are, no matter what. That's what makes the core of the company. But often where the mismatch is that it's in the way you communicate the EVP. That needs to be local. And I'll show you here a lot of different stats that prove that case. And it has to be, of course, a global message, a regional one, divisional experience, by the different groups, and it probably won't be a surprise that in a lot of cases also speaking to the different minorities within the groups is also where you need to localize. What then needs to be consistent is the look and the feel, so that they know it's still you, but with different stories, with different anecdotes, with different colors. The emerging markets and EMEA. So we talked about what's on everyone's millennial. If I was to tell you and call out some major differences, these regions, it is going to all be about the entrepreneurial and creative careers. We saw that stat, but when we're asking them what are their career goals, this comes even stronger. In Africa, it is the #1 long-term career goal, not work-life balance. It's actually to be entrepreneurial and creative. They want to become leaders. That's another extremely strong goal of theirs, especially in the Middle East and Turkey. They want to have international career. This is key, the Middle East, Turkey, Africa, as well as some Southern European countries. And of course, they still want work-life balance. This is a threshold. It's not like it's going to be differentiating anymore. They're expecting that from you. And if you can't, there's plenty others who are addressing it and communicating it. So let's look at the real hard data here. If we're to divide it by Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and I won't spend much on this, but just know that there's even more, and there's some bar charts and like this. I try to just write it down and highlight what's different. Middle East, the leaders or manager will be in the top 3 of their career goals, not personal. I know it looks like they're personal, but it isn't. And in Africa, also the international aspect. So next slides maybe show it in a more visual manner. When we're looking at the UAE alone, Turkey, South Africa, and also comparing it with Western Europe, and we're looking at what are, again, the same question, attractive career goals per business students. We have the same for engineers if you want later. You'll see now here why I say leaders come stronger in Turkey. That's actually the #1. #1 instead in the UAE is still work-life balance, and in Western Europe, whereas in South Africa, the leader, manager, and the security. So all things alike, there are differences that you must address. And when we looked at leadership, so we looked at that for Turkey and Africa, becoming a leader was really, really key. What do they mean by that? And why do they want to know that? I suppose when you know the whys, then it's easier for you to communicate it. Well, the majority of them, they really want that because they want to influence the company. They feel that if they were, they could actually make a difference. Also, to coach and mentor others. This whole mentoring, this whole development, it's not only something they expect from you, but they actually care to also provide it. And that's really, really a wonderful aspect of them. So I really wanted to show this slide. This is newest data we just got 2 weeks ago. It's still not public. That really can help you understand what do they mean by leaders and how can you really communicate this in your messaging. In the next slide, I will also go a little quickly. Some great example, again, I bring out L'Oreal again, of also describing how you can be a creative and dynamic working environment. The reason they're putting them up as their career goals is also because they are being communicated them. So they know they can ask this because, in fact, if you look at these best practices, companies are already promising this. And if you can't have similar ones or similar value propositions, you really are going to miss out. And I'm also showing you the ones that rank the highest. This is also another example. Show your offices. I mean, of course, there's Google. These are some of the ones that just won the best offices. But you also see Turkcaret. I'm sure I'm destroying the name. In Bursa, which is in Turkey, you can have simple things like that. Show them. That's what's important for them. And even if it's not so fancy, they still want to see your offices. So try to show them how you're fostering that, how you work in teams. When we're looking at deep dive in Africa specifically, and you're looking at Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, again, what you see is it's very hard to generalize. There are definitely some nuances. As you see, Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, it is entrepreneurial so much, so strong, the strongest we've ever seen before, and then followed by the leader, a manager. As you see here, work-life balance is important, but really not going to be at the top. But for South Africa, yes. So again, if you've got a Pan-African message, that's going to have to be part of it, and we're going to show you much more, so apologies for going so quickly. The next slide. Yes, great. How are they communicating international opportunities? As you see here, you can maybe sometimes not have to talk about it, but maybe show it with a globe, and these are some great best practices. Maybe by Deloitte has a great global internship that has really won them a lot of attention and have incredible trainee development that they talk a lot about how global it is. We see here different challenges like the 3M has, EMEA, Africa and Mozambique and Angola, where they bring you to the oil rig and they show you how you can see it. You actually get to see. It's a 3D sort of experience. And then again, Oracle's next year. I cannot tell you how many, if I just scout in the last 2 months, of obvious visualizations of offering that. You will see hundreds, so I will constantly keep updated on LinkedIn. You can see that. So work-life balance. I don't mean to say you shouldn't look at it. Actually, it is absolutely important. And what do they mean by it? I mentioned it earlier. It's really all about respect. It is not about how many hours they work. Shockingly enough, Gen Xers really was more about, when we look at the differences, how many hours a week they work or not working too many long hours. Instead, this is all about respecting the others and being in an environment where I don't need to feel a mask. And again, as I said, feeling at home at work. So what's going to be important? It is about, really, at the end, respect, about having a diversity and inclusion policy, having an openness to understanding and including. And when it comes to this topic, what's important is not just the visible aspects, because those are the first things we see, but much more, and especially for this group of millennials, the invisible aspects, what they call cultural elements. So there's a lot of the visible, ethnicity, gender, but what's underneath is much broader, and all of these you can build upon, but you need to address and maybe hone in more or not in some countries rather than not. We know socioeconomic background's a big topic in the UK now, but nationalization is, and racialization, big in the UAE. Of course, ethnicity in Africa as well, disability in Brazil. So a lot of questions, which brings us back to this following one, which we just asked. What does diversity mean to millennials? When we broke it down by Africa, Middle East, Central European, and Western Europe, really it was, as you see, across the board about the cultural diversity, so personality, all the invisible traits. In Africa, though, of course, you see a 66% that calls it ethnic, of course, diversity. In the Middle East, a 46%. But for the grand majority, it is about those invisible traits. So how to address it? What's important is, as it is really about the personality, we've asked millennials, which of the following aspects of your future employer's culture should match your personality? Because that's what will make them feel respected and so on. So really it does come down to the friendliness. Both of the people, if you want to engage them, but if you're looking at attracting them, the people you send out, they need to be friendly. I cannot tell you how many quotes in every country I see that it is all about, oh, they sent arrogant people or boring. It be when you are attracting them, but also when you're retaining them, it is about working with friendly people to view inequality and diversity and the empowerment. So all these aspects, if I was you, I would address and make sure to train whoever is going out there, engaging on social media with them and so on, to see this, to hear about this. So just to give you an example, if Facebook doesn't know what to write on their Facebook careers page, then no one really does. In fact, I ask them to really look at that and advise me, where are people spending just on your own careers page of your own Facebook? 80% are spending time of millennials on the extra, the additional perks. That's where and what they want to see on this particular aspect on Facebook. Don't spend too much time telling what you do. It is here. It is going to be here. What does this mean? It's about feeling that I'll be included, that my preferences will be. Who does it well locally? This is Do, a telecommunication company in the UAE, that here, as you see, their extra additional perks calls them out like this. So this is the kind of message that extremely well resonates and communicates respect for its people, inclusive, friendly. This is another great example from the United States. It's Zappos, not sexy at all business, but that was able to really revolutionize, wrote a great book on, how to really bring creative and fun and working environments and looking at everything differently. Spotify, and then also one of my favorites is IKEA. Look at what they call their employees. They don't call them employees anymore. They call them their closest friend. Meet some of our 131,000 closest friends. And then, if you click again, you'll see another great quote here in the UAE from the Prime Minister. A happy employee is more productive, more energetic, and more creative. So bringing up the happiness. Don't be shy. This is what they want to hear. This is also what we all want to have. in the work environment. So if you can communicate it, that's how you're going to win them. Other ways and best practices of diversity and inclusion is having respect for its people, and these are just Apple, Google, P&G, IBM. If you continue, you'll see even more. Danone. I cannot tell you how many more. If you have stats also to prove your women was in a big topic, especially in the Middle East, promote it, show it, just show it. I love the HP here. It's about their personalities, and they're constantly updating visuals. And then you also have the openness to veterans that GE has. So here in Emirates, encouraging my peers. So what are their biggest fears? Why am I talking to you about why you should communicate, and these are their career goals? We haven't even gotten to what drives them to an employer. Because if you know their biggest fears, then you really know how to address their biggest issue. When we ask them what is their biggest fear, it is that I will get stuck with no development opportunities, that I won't realize my career goals, and that I won't get a job that matches my personalities. No matter what countries we're looking at, this is going to be important. So why did I show you what I showed you before? Now you realize. Because I want to make sure that, again, their fears are reassured, and that you can sort of, bring those down and really start communicating why joining you. So if we proceed, because I know I'm running out of time, as always. So how can your organization gain a talent advantage from what I said? Well, first and foremost, define a strong value proposition. I'm not going to explain to you, as you know, we really work a lot with building EVPs for firms, but make sure it's attractive. It's true, so it's not saying that you've got work-life balance when in fact that doesn't happen. It'll come out much faster than you ever know from your own employees. Distinct, sustainable, and visionary, and we'll see a couple of great examples of how. And then the second one is also to make sure you also communicate it, because if you think you have it or you have it, but then you're not communicating to this generation in the channels we just saw they're using it and they're constantly on, which is social media and their mobiles, then honestly, it's just as much as you didn't have it, because it's all about who's out there reaching them, impacting them, and constantly and with frequency. So those firms who do both are the ones that are at the top of our rankings. There are some, though, that really activate very well and maybe not live up, that are maybe gaining a lot of attractiveness, but then isn't sustainable. So what are attributes that students find most appealing? I'll go very quickly through this, but I just want you to know that I have these drivers for attractiveness for every country broken down. But if we look at this, you will find consistencies with professional training and development, that's the global one, creative and dynamic work environments, and also providing leaders who will support their development. In the Middle East, what will be absolutely key, especially to be appealing for the Emiratis or the Saudi nationals, or it will be the friendly working environment. That we see these groups, these really, really putting at the top, and across also all the Middle East as well. Africa, it'll be also about these attractive products and services, showing them will be key. And in Turkey, providing and identifying what the clear path for advancement, because you saw that they want to become leaders. And also the prestige in Turkey is still quite an important driver for them. So having that. So if we go into more, we also see CSR growing a lot. If we break it down by Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and UAE, not going to spend much time on this, but just to show you there may be and are some differences. The high future earnings is something important in Lebanon, but the friendly working environment in Saudi. And then, as you see, the rest is the same. Just wanted you to know that it's all here, and we can break it down. And let's look at who's doing this very, very, very well are the following firms. And I'm showing you these because these are consistently ranked top in all these regions. So it's Siemens, everywhere, no matter, always talking about their training programs. GE, the same, calling them leadership programs, because as you understand, if you want to attract, if people want to become leaders, and also you want to have attract game changers, having a training program that is more described as a leadership program, that's going to really attract. IBM, Leaders Today and Tomorrow, even has them as their claim. Then Deloitte University, incredible training and development constantly. Coca-Cola Talent Program, Mubadala in the region, learning and development. Here you've got Savik, and so on. And I could show you many more, both global and local. And these are just some call-outs for Ghana, Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa. And why I'm doing this is because I want to let you know that having a Pan-African approach is the worst thing you could have, because if you look at this, obviously what's driving them to employers are quite different in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, versus South Africa. So really here, the localization of your message is a must. I don't have time, can't go through it. Love to in the future maybe do hone in on Africa in particular, but as we saw that leaders will support their development is really key. What do they expect from a good manager? In Africa, the most important quality is empower his or her team. In Eastern Europe, it was about having an expert in the field. And in the Middle East, it is all about having a manager to be a role model. I really strongly advise you to identify those role models in your organization and have similar things like what we're about to see, just calling out in the next slide. Bring them out, have them speak, have them say quotes like this. As you see here, you got Elon Musk, which is, of course, also a real inspiration for all of Africa into, being entrepreneurial and doing things. But you have, again, Siemens, you've got GE, and you have, of course, the Yahoo ladies. So I have 50, 60 different examples that I see all the time. But what are students suggesting? Now, here you see I've had to really mix some Middle East and Africa here as well, but it is all about leadership opportunities sooner, providing faster advancement in the UAE, providing professional training, again, improving gender equality in Saudi, make internship application also still that experience. No matter where, we always get the fact that these applicant tracking systems seem to still be a nightmare and experience for graduates. Be more friendly or more on the emotional motivations, the authenticness, the caring, the international relocation, as well as the unconventional working environment that is fun and creative. We have thousands and thousands of quotes. Please, please, please ask us for them. So just to sum up, because I have very little time, differentiation, inclusiveness is going to be key in your message, how to have a winning one. Global values translated in authentic local messages. You saw here, hopefully I gave you some ideas. Relevance to resonance, going from explaining to the audience what it is that you do to why you do it. And again, GE and Coca-Cola ethics projects, all these are great, great examples of who's done it really, really effectively. So getting into this next section, how do you do from going to good to great on the activation? We saw already at the beginning of this deck a lot of differences and the great channels to use. But going back, deciding, how do you build it, how do you look? It's now become a lot more complicated, probably more cost effective because of the new technologies, but also very complicated because now you have both to balance the direct and the indirect channels, which in the past there were no real indirect ones. Deciding on your overall communication channel, understanding how to allocate between channels, because in every country they're going to be different. Evaluate and adjust also your current message will be the first part, but on the indirect, it's also, you need to constantly monitor what's being said. So if you're going to be on these networks, you're going to have to see what is said. The importance of social media. Now, this is where organizations are spending. Have been spending their money until 2003 was the corporate website. But as we see now, and further even more in these regions, the spending is really quickly going all into the social media, and so it should if we just looked at some stats we saw before. So, but still, it's going, but it's not going fast, because if we're looking at the daily screen use versus where the money is being spent, we still see a big discrepancy. The money is still being spent a lot on TV, and yet not so much on smartphones, whereas we saw this generation in these areas are really not. So again, opportunities. I would like to see problem as that. So what should you keep in mind when it comes to student behaviors? They're using a combination of print, digital, and in-person channels. That actually show you a stat that shows that print, which I'm telling everyone in every country is not important, is actually really, really key, especially in Africa. They're using an average of 9.5 to 8, depending on the region, channels. So you need to have a presence across all these channels. And as you see here, this is the breakout. The digital, there's a larger penetration in Africa, 86%. On the in-person, that's key in the Middle East. There's still a larger need there to see in person. But what really, really shocked me and surprised me, but because in other countries that is now instead decreasing a lot, is the print channels. It is absolutely important to have a presence there. Now I know that we have what type of prints in every country, and that's where the biggest investment is, as you see the cost associated to it. But I would say that if generally I say you can really slow down and take that out in these regions, it's actually really, really important to have a brochure. It's really, really important to advertise in some of the career papers. It's also, of course, very, very important to just invest in advertising in some specific school papers and so on. So let's get into some more specifics. What are some, the thing to do though, no matter what it is, the device you're using, is stop looking and taking pictures and thinking that if you show different pictures of different represented minorities or different beautiful views, that will be appealing. Not at all. So it is about, and I know you know that here on the call, but it is about storytelling. Absolutely. Tell yours, tell the whys of what you're doing. and do that through testimonials. This is what came out the most as the channel they want to hear it. Online contests, they love them. Live webinars and Q&A is growing rapidly everywhere. It's a way for you to be everywhere there in person and in an intimate, high-tech, high-touch approach where they can also ask. That's really, really growing a lot. Destination Facebook pages, behind-the-scenes look at the company innovation, constantly update them with that because you saw that's important for them to see. And also virtual guides to your corporate campus because they want to see where it is that they will work. You saw that. That's important to them. So this is particular the ones that were the top for your regions. This is a great example, J&J's, that talks about the storytelling throughout YouTube, LinkedIn, and Pinterest, and so on. Don't have much time to sit on it, but you will get this deck. When we looked at top of mind, who has the best recruiting activities and who would I advise you to look at and what they're doing in these regions, I thought this were, rather than any stat I could show you, probably the best takeaway is these are the firms that top of mind come up as offering the best and experience. Graduates love them, and why? Procter & Gamble, Google, Unilever, in Africa, Escom, KPMG, ABSA, again, PwC, Unilever, again, Standard Bank. Really, really advise you to look at them, and we have a lot of quotes on what do they do well. And in the Middle East, again, GE, Unilever, Google, and so on. So what you probably will see, especially when you have more time to view this, is it's a lot of the same firms. And these firms were able to do exactly what this slide does, have a strong EVP, actually a strong global message that then, though, was really, really phenomenally activated, both in the message and the activations, both internally, externally, and digitally. So don't have much time else. I'm running out and I want to see some questions. Here are some very great examples of localizing your message. EY here, there's Africa, there's the Middle East. So all of them, no matter it looks the same, but you can see that they're also doing it in local languages. When it comes to Emirates, the airline, oops, we went a little too fast. Emirates, also McKinsey Middle East, having both in language, local language and non, is absolutely important if you're really trying to attract these the Emiratis as well and really feel like you're offering an inclusive and respect their culture and personality and so on that comes with it. If we go to the next slide, these are just some great examples of, we saw live webinars that are being really, really well received for Africa. This is South African breweries. Look at their LinkedIn page. Phenomenal. Ranks really at the top. And then I have the last few slides before we're ending. And these are also the best employer advertising reaching across multiple channels. So this could be everything from LinkedIn and presence to advertising and so on. But what you'll see is, again, similarly the same companies always mentioned. And the most used channels for top employer advertising. We're talking employer advertising. So these in percentage. And as you see, unfortunately, it's all the Middle East, but we have it for each region. And also here, I would say having one for women and men and looking at the breakdown would be also key. And Turkey, the top there, as well as what are the channels. So I'm going to show it to you and quickly take it away because I want to finish up with showing you the last very quickly. P&G. We saw them coming up. Well, look at their site. Learn and apply, very clear. And then we go in, you have a massive amount of videos. If you click again, you'll see their CEO challenge. They're constantly putting a lot of the different things you've seen and interacting throughout and allowing them to find everything once they joined and interacting with them. If you go to the next slide, you'll see another few best practices. I'm not going to read them, but what do they recommend? Up to date, about interesting and proud, friendly attitude, all things we discussed, honest responses. What not to do is on the next slide. Not responding, not very detailed, vague, and competitions that are not informative. So if you're going to have one, please make sure it's engaging and not just to have one. And then last two is Microsoft. You saw them everywhere. Their Facebook page is great. It gets lots and lots of hits and very engaging. They also do fun Skype roulette where they do very quick interviews and combine them. GE, don't need to say, across all different channels from Pinterest to YouTube to LinkedIn and Instagram. The next slide shows you, just showing you who came at the top of all these. So if you go to the next slide of these top of mind. Oops, oh great. It's about really finding what's, yes, go to the next slide. And the next slide, again, it's really trying to find what's innovative. So what we did is, on the next slide, show you, sorry, we're having some, great. We asked them, what are new innovative channels that students want to use to interact with employers? 52% say virtual career fairs, 46% virtual internship programs, 43% interactive webinars, mentoring programs, everything. These are the new things that if I could advise you. Of course, as you saw, we need to do print, but going ahead, things that they really like, these are very strong percentages, and again, reasons to, across your regions, to really look to invest in. So final but not least, leave you with last examples of who localizes it very well and talks about games and all the things we just saw before. And the next, getting to the last slide. These are other examples. The last slide. Go beyond traditional channels. You will never go wrong doing something different. They love it, even though it doesn't work. They're always saying at least they tried something different. Tell them about the cool stuff you do, not just if it's about you branding them, but that's really great. And you'll see some slides ahead that I couldn't show you much that Coca-Cola and GE does. Use both high-tech and high-touch approach. Start the engagement. Don't just you tell, but have the conversation. And also, very, very important, where all the top employers are spending time is employ your star players. Coach them. Make sure they know. As you saw, it's about the friendly people. And the first people they see, you can do everything right on your side, but then if you don't send the right people who then continue that great experience, that's a deal breaker for them. So I thank you so much. I know I took all my time, and I don't know if there are any questions, but thanks for spending the time and the hour with me, and I really do hope this was interesting.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Yeah, we got a couple of questions. One was very good from Mark. He had a question about language. You mentioned Africa and Middle East, but how's the language? You have to localize, or is English?
Yes, actually, of course, within the limit of what's possible, we find that if you do, in fact, you saw respect is important, and having an inclusive working environment. If you really do want to try to attract and engage many of the top firms in the UAE, specifically, that are trying to really recruit Emiratis, they have all in Arabic. So if you can, having the option is absolutely something that would really show a lot of the respect for their language. The same in Turkish, of course, absolutely necessary if you want to. So I would say that if you have the choice, offer both, and that will really be seen as you are a friendly working environment that respects their culture and their personality as well as their language.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah, time is up. We will share the presentation afterwards with you guys, and you have our email, so please let us know if you have any more questions, and we will get back to you with them. And we will also send you a follow-up email thanking you all for taking your time today. Have a great Wednesday, everyone, and good luck in finding the talent in emerging markets.